Welcome to my study today. I'm going to look at active and passive sentences. How do we change an active sentence into a passive one? I'll help you recognise the parts of the sentence to make this much easier, and there are 2 exercises at the end of the video for you to practice. So, let's get started. Why do we need passive sentences? Well, we can replace the indefinite pronoun one with a passive sentence and reflexive verbs in other languages. If you know French, you'll be familiar with the on, German man, and in the Slavonic languages, other reflexive verbs. We can replace all these with passive sentences in English. Someone has stolen my books is active. My books have been stolen is passive. Let's look at that more closely with an example in the present tense. The burglar breaks the window is an active sentence. Let's break it down into its parts. The burglar is the subject, and I'm going to call him the doer of the action. The window is the object and is the receiver of the action. Now this is important later for when you identify the parts of an active sentence which you want to make into a passive one. We can make this sentence passive by using the verb to be plus a past participle. And the new sentence looks like this. The window is broken by the burglar. Now when I was teaching in Cambridge, I always used to ask my students to do this exercise, and they nearly always changed the tense in this sentence. They would say the window was broken. So it's a very important point not to change the tense from the active to the passive because it changes the sense and meaning of the sentence. Let's look more closely at the parts now. The window is now the subject, and it was the receiver of the action before, and the burglar is now the object, and it was the doer of the action before. So they've changed places. The passive sentence has now changed the focus of our attention, and we are now more interested in the window. But you notice here that I've introduced something different into this sentence, and it's the word by the burglar. By introduces what we call the agent. The subject of the active verb becomes the agent of the passive verb. But you must be careful because very often we don't mention it in English. Look at this sentence. The rubbish has not been collected. And I don't have to say by the bin men because we know it's the bin men. So we leave it at the rubbish has not been collected. No agent. When the main interest of the speaker or writer is on the verb activity itself rather than on the active subject, we like to express the idea first. And here's a very good example. People speak English all over the world. English is spoken all over the world. Another sentence we like to change into a passive from an active is when it's introduced by the phrase people say. We like to say it is said. People say bananas are better for us than other fruit. And we change that into a passive sentence, it is said. Bananas are better for us than other fruit. Notice there is no agent. We don't say it is said by people. It's obvious it's people. But we really prefer the second construction. Bananas are said to be better for us than other fruit. And you notice here I've used the infinitive of the verb to be. The second structure is really preferred as a passive sentence in this type of example. Now let's look at 1 or 2 of the rules of how to make a passive sentence. First, we must consider the verb with 2 objects. Someone gave me a book. Object 1 is me, object 2 is book. And we change that in a passive construction to I was given a book. Generally we choose the personal object as the subject of the passive voice, so I comes first here. We have to use the agent sometimes if the sentence isn't going to make sense. I could say Hamlet was written, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, so I would add Hamlet was written by Shakespeare. And we must include the prepositions. They will look after you well. You will be well looked after. When we are not too concerned or we don't know who did the action, we can use a passive construction. The victim was murdered. We don't know by whom. We can't use an agent. It's just a generalization. When the subject of the active verb is one. Now, you don't hear this a lot in English, but people still do sometimes say one sees mobile phones everywhere, or one does this, one does that. But we can change that. Mobile phones are seen everywhere to a passive sentence. And when we want to avoid changing a subject, the passive is very useful. When he arrived home, a policeman arrested him. It's much simpler to say, when he arrived home, he was arrested. I'll make a special note here to talk about the verb to be born. It's passive and it's usually in the past. Where were you born? Not where are you born? I was born in London. Not I am born. But you can change the tenses. How many babies are born each day? I'm sure you realise by now that only verbs with objects, transitive verbs, can be made passive. But let's have a look at some of the other tenses we can use to make passive sentences. Here's the postman to help us. Present simple tense. The postman delivers the post every day. The post is delivered every day. And we don't need the postman as the agent because we know it's the postman. Past simple. The postman delivered the post every day. The post was delivered every day. Present continuous. The postman is delivering the post now. The post is being delivered now. Past continuous. The postman was delivering the post when I arrived. The post was being delivered when I arrived. Present perfect. The post is here. The postman has delivered it at last. The post has been delivered at last. Past perfect. The postman had delivered the post at 8 o'clock. The post had been delivered at 8 o'clock. And just to remind you, when you have a verb with two objects, the postman gave me some letters. We prefer the personal pronoun first. I was given some letters. If you found my lesson helpful today, could I ask you to please subscribe below and ring that bell? Thanks. Now here's the first exercise, which will help you identify the doer and the receiver of the action in the sentence. Exercise 1. Make a chart like the one in the illustration and then decide whether the subject of the sentence is the doer or the receiver of the action, and then the voice of the verb, active or passive. Sentences 1 and 2 are done for you. And here are the answers. Exercise 2. Change the sentences from active to passive voice, but be careful to stay with the same tenses and ask yourself, do I need to use the agent? And here are the answers. Next time we'll have a look at how to use sorry, excuse me, and I'm afraid, some very useful expressions. So, thanks for watching. Please subscribe below and I'll see you next time. Bye!